Hello guys and welcome to this video. In this tutorial we will be looking at name visibility in C++. So we're looking at how far that we can use a particular name for a variable and what to do if the name collides with another one. Because in most cases when the program spans a certain length or is so large, then most times then some names would have to collide, some names of functions will collide and some names of variables will collide. So we're going to look at all of those aspects and their limitations and how to override them, right? So a local variable name visibility. So a local variable is any variable that is declared under a particular block of code. So you can have it declared under a particular function or a selective statement or loop. And then the global variable is one that is defined outside of any function or selective statement or loop. So right now we have a function called name visibility that I created for this particular tutorial. So when we declare a variable here called int x and equate it to 8, assign 8 to it, then this is a global variable. But the moment we come in here in the function and declare int y equal, let's say 9, then this is a local variable. So that means that in another function we cannot access this particular variable y. We can't access it outside its block of code or outside its scope, right? So but we can access global variables everywhere, whether in functions, whether in loops, or anywhere. We can access global variables anywhere, but we can't access local variables anywhere, just under the block of code that it was used. That's where exactly we can access the local variable. So, and I think you would understand it better when we start using real examples to illustrate these concepts. So look at use this block of code to further explain visibility. Right, so this is a block of code under the function void visibility. So this entire block of code is under a function. Now I will just use it under the function to also explain the concept of scope. So over here we have this two variables declared and initiated outside of this block. So these two curly brackets signify the beginning and end of a block. So this is one block and this is the code that is in this block, and this particular code is outside of that block. So let's say that we have block A and we have block B, but this block is kind of global. You can use it anywhere, you can call it inside this block, but any variable here cannot be called outside of this block. So we have int x equal 10, int y equal 20, and in this block we have int x, we have initiated another x. So this x and this x are not the same, right? They are not the same. This x is global and this x is local. It's for just this particular block of code. So when I come over here, I can't declare another int x because this will make it a global one, but in that case they will collide. Let's first run this and then let's see whether we can mix it and twist and understand from what we do. Right, so this is an inner scope and I took this example from the C++ website. So this one is declared locally under this particular scope, local one, and we have initiated it to 50, right? But this y, we know it's declared outside of this particular block, so it has a kind of global scale. Even though we are inside this function, let's just use this to typically understand global and local. So let's say that this is block A and this is block B, and this block is a global block, but this one is a local one. So y over here, this y was accessed inside this block because this is declared globally. And now we want to output the variables respectively. So we output those in the inner block and we output those in the outer block, and this is the outer block, right? So let's run this and then we can use the whoops. So return statement with a value. So void, we can't do this. So let me just clear this and run this. So now we have the inner block x, this x over here, returning 50 because we have declared a new variable called x. Even though we have a global one called x, we have declared a new one called x, and assigned 50 to it. So the inner one returned 50, and then we reassigned the global y to 50. So y became 50. Now for the outer block, x was still 10 as we have declared initially over here. So x was still 10 over here, right? As we have seen in this output. But y was 50 because we have updated the global one inside this local block. I hope you get what I am saying. Right, so that is basically the global application and the local application of variables. Another way that you can explicitly understand this is, let me use a second example over here. I think that would be much better. So let's say that I declare a variable called int a, and then I assign it 6 to it, and then I have a function called int add, and it's going to take two parameters, int a, let's just say int num1 n1, and then it's going to take int n2. You can use a double, it really doesn't matter. This is what I want to put inside. I want to say int result is equal to n1 plus n2, right? And I want to just return the result, right? Let's run this and be sure we don't have any error. Whoops, let me close this. Right, so I can't declare a function inside another function, so I just have to cut this and then paste it just above this function that I'll be using. So I'll paste it over here. So we have defined a function. We have looked at functions already, and you know that we can define functions inside another functions. So you will be using your int main function, but I am using void name visibility. So you will declare this function outside of your int main function, and then this will be, so we can equally declare this outside of our int main function over here. So this is going to be a global variable, right? So now take note, this is our function, right? And this is our global variable. So let's say that we get in here and then we create another variable called int a, right? And then we assign it to, let me say x, and then we assign it to 10, right? Then we say a is equal to 6. So let me first declare this x over here, right? So what I just did was I declared a variable called a, and then I assigned 6 to it. Then I created a function called add, and that function is to take two parameters, num1 and num2. And what that function is to do is to add these two numbers and return the value as a result. Then I got inside and changed this global variable, right, a to 66. So the a was updated because it's a global one. And then inside here there is another variable called int x, which is equal to 10, right? So what we want to do is we want to see if we want to print the value of a. So when I call this, I want to see out a, and then end line endl, right? So this function will see out, or it will print a anytime we call it, and then return this result when we call it. So it's going to return whatever inputs that we'll be having here, right? Then we want to see if we can access this particular variable globally, right? So this is a local variable, but this is a global variable. So let's come to our main function and then try to run that code. So let's first try to access a, right? Let's first try to access a, and this will be endl like that. So let's see what a is going to return us. So we run this, and we have over here, it says expected this before a. We have to input a semicolon over there, right? So we run this, and we have a returning as 6, right? So this is the global value of 6. So let's call this function, and then we print out the value of a. So cout, let me just call it explicitly. So we have, it's called add, right? So I'm adding 1 2 2, right? And I'm running this, and now this was the global a6, and this is the local, and this is the updated a66, because when we call this function, it's going to automatically print out that line over there, even though we have not called cout over here, even though we have not preceded with cout. When we call it, we just wanted to print out a, so we didn't need to include cout over there, right? So we can see that the value of a was being able to be changed inside this function because it's a global one. It was accessed locally by this function because a is a global variable, right? So that is what I want to mean. Now let's see whether we can access x. So let's try to print out x, and we run this. So let me close this one, it was still open. So I run this, and now we see that x was not declared in this scope. In this scope means that this is a global scope, right? But then x was not declared globally, it was declared locally. So in order to be able to access x, we have to enter the add function before we can access it. We can't access it outside of its scope. So that's why this line of arrow means that x was not declared in this scope, so it wasn't declared globally. In order to access it globally, we have to define it globally, right? So I hope this example helped to clarify the visibility of variables that are declared under certain blocks of code and under certain functions, right? So we move on to the next section. So I'll just clear out this over here.